In this project, I'm analyzing a real malicious PCAP file from malware-traffic-analysis.net to identify the infected host, suspicious infrastructure, and key indicators of compromise. First, I'm setting up my project folder to keep my screenshots, notes, PCAP file, and final report organized throughout the investigation. Next, I'm downloading a real malicious PCAP file from malware-traffic-analysis.net. This site provides real packet capture files for training, which lets me analyze malicious traffic safely without running malware on my own computer. For this investigation, I'm using the most recent exercise called Easy as 123. After downloading and extracting the PCAP file, I opened it in Wireshark and started documenting my findings. First, I'm checking endpoints and conversations to see which internal host has the most traffic. I'm sorting by packet volume so I can identify the likely infected machine and know which IP address to focus on. The host that stood out the most was 10.2.28.88. This IP appeared repeatedly in the traffic and was communicating with several external systems. Next, I'm checking for possible data exfiltration or credential theft in the HTTP traffic. I'm using the filter http.request.method equals post because post requests are often used to send data from the infected machine to an external server. This helps me see if the malware may have tried to steal credentials or send information out of the network. I found repeated HTTP post requests from 10.2.28.88 to 45.131.214.85. The requests were going to http 45.131.241.85/fakeurl.htm. This stood out because the infected host kept sending post requests to an external IP, which can be a sign of command and control traffic or remote access activity. One important clue was the user agent value NetSupport Manager 1.3. That pointed toward NetSupport Manager being used as a remote access tool. Again, I confirmed that multiple HTTP post requests were observed from the suspected infected host 10.2.28.88 to the external IP address 45.131.214.85. And the requests were sent to fakeurl.htm using unencrypted HTTP. Next, I'm filtering for DNS traffic in Wireshark to look for signs of command and control activity. I'm filtering for DNS queries and checking for repeated NX domain responses, random looking domain names, and unusual TLDs. Most of the DNS requests were for normal services like Microsoft, Bing, Adobe, and Windows updates. However, one domain stood out the most, Medusa.xyz. This domain looked suspicious because it used a .xyz top-level domain and resolved to the external IP address 45.131.214.85. I'm also checking DNS failures using the filter dns.flags.rcode equals 3. This showed repeated no such name responses for domains like wpad.easyas123.tech and wpad.mshome.net. I'm documenting these as unusual DNS activity, but they have not been confirmed as malicious yet. Next, I'm checking the HTTP post traffic to see if the infected host is sending data out. First, I'm following the HTTP stream to review the post traffic more closely. The infected host is repeatedly sending post requests to 45.131.214.85 slash fakeurl.htm using the user agent NetSupport Manager 1.3. The stream also shows command fields and encoded looking data, which makes the traffic look even more suspicious. This confirms that the traffic is related to NetSupport Manager RAT activity and supports the finding that the infected host was communicating with the command and control server. Next, I'm checking the HTTP object section in Wireshark to see if anything was transferred over HTTP during the capture. The object that stood out was fakeurl.htm because it appeared repeatedly and was connected to the same suspicious IP address. Because this matched the repeated post traffic from the infected host, I documented fakeurl.htm as a suspicious HTTP object connected to the NetSupport RAT activity. Once I identified 10.2.28.88 as the suspected infected host, I filtered the traffic for that IP address. This showed repeated post requests to 45.131.214.85 and the user agent NetSupport Manager 1.3, which supported the NetSupport RAT binding. Next, I'm building my IOC list from the Wireshark traffic. I'm pulling up the main indicators, including the suspicious IP address, domain, URL, and repeated HTTP object connected to the infected host. The main indicators that I found were the IP address 45.131.214.85, the domain medusa.xyz, the suspicious URL, and the file object fakeurl.htm. Now I'm moving into threat intelligence enrichment. This is where I take the IOCs from Wireshark and check them in tools like VirusTotal, AbuseIPDB, AlienVault OTX, and Shodan to see if they are connected to a known malicious activity. VirusTotal showed that 11 out of 91 vendors flagged the IP address as malicious, which supported the suspicious activity I found in Wireshark. It was also linked to the domain medusa.xyz and related executable files, which supports that this IP was part of a malicious infrastructure. Now I'm searching the domain medusa.xyz in VirusTotal. This domain was flagged by 12 out of 91 vendors and resolved back to the same suspicious IP address, 45.131.214.85. I'm also checking the full URL in VirusTotal. The URL was flagged by 14 out of 95 vendors and was associated with malware, spyware, and unknown infection source activity. Finally, I'm checking the IP in AbuseIPDB. AbuseIPDB showed no reports and a 0% abuse score, so I documented that as a negative finding. Even though AbuseIPDB didn't flag the IP, I still kept it as suspicious because both Wireshark and VirusTotal supported the finding. Next, I'm using AlienVault OTX and Shodan to check the domain and IP address. OTX did not show any related pulses for the IP address, but it did show that the IP was connected to medusa.xyz and a suspicious URL, fakeurl.htm. Next, I'm searching the domain medusa.xyz. OTX did not show any related pulses or files, but it did provide useful domain details. The domain was registered through Dynadot LLC and was created on February 27, 2026. I also searched the suspicious URL, but no results were found. Next, I'm checking the IOCs in Shodan. Shodan showed that the suspicious IP address had port 80 open and was running a Python-based HTTP server. Next, I'm checking the domain in Shodan. Shodan did not return any results for the domain, so I'm documenting this as a negative finding. There were also no results for the URL, so I'm documenting this as another negative finding. Now I'm checking the malware traffic analysis.net answer key to confirm my findings. This helps me verify the infected host, the malware family, and any IOCs I may have missed during my initial analysis. It looks like there's one inconsistency in the answer key. The answer key lists the victim IP as 10.1.28.88, but the lab network and the Wireshark screenshots show 10.2.28.88. Because of that, I'm documenting 10.2.28.88 as the infected host and treating the other IP as a likely typo. The answer key also gave me a few key victim details, including the MAC address, the Windows username brolf, and the full name Becca Rolf. This helped me confirm that my main findings were correct and allowed me to update my notes with the details I missed. Finally, here is my report for this investigation. The report summarizes the full network traffic analysis, including the executive summary, infected host details, traffic findings, IOC table, malware identification, and recommendations. In the report, I documented that the infected host was 10.2.28.88. The malware family was NetSupport Manager RAT, and the main suspicious infrastructure was 45.131.214.85, Medusa.xyz, and fakeurl.htm. The IOC table is one of the most important parts because it clearly lists the indicators that could be used for blocking, detection, or further investigation. I also included the threat intelligence results from VirusTotal, AbuseIPDB, AlienVault OTX, and Shodan to support my findings. At the end of the report, I added recommendations like isolating the infected host, blocking the malicious IP and domain, monitoring for post traffic to fake url.htm, and investigating NetSupport Manager activity on the endpoint. Next, I'll be investigating the same PCAP file again in Wireshark, but this time I'll focus on finding the additional victim details from the answer key, including the host name, MAC address, Windows username, and full name.